There's a quantum paradox that destroys most people's manifestation attempts before they even begin. A contradiction so fundamental, so perfectly designed to keep you locked in perpetual wanting that 99% of manifestation teachings actually reinforce it while claiming to help you transcend it. The paradox is this: the energy of wanting is the exact frequency that confirms you don't have what you want. And in quantum mechanics, where observation determines reality, the state of wanting broadcasts to the field, "I lack this thing," which causes the field to deliver more experiences of lacking that thing. You're creating the absence through the very act of wanting to end the absence. And if you're reading these words right now, if something inexplicable drew your attention here, you're about to discover why the moment you stop wanting is the moment you match the future timeline where you already have everything you've been desperately trying to manifest. This isn't about positive thinking or pretending you don't want what you want. This isn't spiritual bypassing or toxic positivity telling you to just be grateful for what you have and forget your desires. This is quantum mechanics. This is the mathematics of how consciousness interfaces with probability waves. This is the physics of timeline navigation that most humans never learn because they're too busy wanting to understand that wanting is the barrier, not the bridge. Every moment you spend in the energy of wanting is a moment you're tuned to the timeline where you don't have it. And every moment you shift from wanting to being is a moment you're tuning to the timeline where you already have it. Can you feel it? That immediate resistance rising as you read these words. But I do want things. I'm supposed to want things. How do I manifest without wanting? That resistance is the wanting addiction speaking. Because wanting feels productive. Wanting feels like you're doing something. Wanting gives you sense of direction, purpose, motivation. But wanting is also the frequency that quantum mechanically guarantees you'll remain in the timeline where what you want stays perpetually out of reach, always coming but never arriving, forever in the future that you're wanting toward rather than in the present that you're being from. Quantum physics proves this through the observer effect. The consciousness observing the experiment determines the outcome. But here's the part most people miss. Observation isn't just seeing. Observation is the entire state of consciousness in the moment of perceiving. When you observe from wanting, you're in state of lack. And lack is what you observe into manifestation. When you observe from having, from being the person who already has it, from matching the frequency of the future timeline where it's present, you collapse that timeline into your current experience. Not eventually, immediately. Through the quantum mechanics of consciousness determining which probability wave collapses into lived reality. But the revelation that changes everything is this: the future where you have what you want already exists. Not as potential waiting to become real, as actual timeline, actual reality, actual version of you living actual life where the desire is fulfilled. That timeline is as real as this timeline. It exists now, simultaneously with this now. And the only difference between this timeline and that timeline is frequency. The vibrational state, the consciousness configuration. This timeline is tuned to wanting frequency. That timeline is tuned to having frequency. And the moment you shift from wanting to being, you don't create the fulfilled timeline. You match it. You tune into it. You collapse your awareness into it like changing channels on television. Ancient mystics encoded this truth across every tradition. Before you ask, it is given. Not after you ask and work and wait and want. Before. Because in quantum reality, all timelines exist simultaneously. The timeline where your desire is fulfilled exists before you desire it, simultaneous with you desiring it, waiting only for you to stop wanting it and start being it. Seek and you shall find is mistranslated. The original means match the frequency and you'll merge with the reality. Stop seeking, start being, and what you were seeking reveals itself as already present, already available, already yours in the timeline you've now matched through releasing the wanting that kept you tuned to the lacking timeline. Right now, as you engage with these words, something is shifting in your quantum field. Can you feel it? That subtle release of the grip that wanting has had on your consciousness? That opening into the recognition that maybe, just maybe, wanting is the problem, not the solution? That loosening is the beginning. That recognition is the activation. That shift is where timeline navigation becomes possible, and the future that already has everything starts bleeding into present experience, not because you're creating it, but because you're matching it, tuning to it, collapsing into it, through the simple act of releasing the wanting frequency that was keeping you locked in the lacking timeline. Take a breath, deep one, and as you breathe, notice something profound. This breath exists in present moment, not in wanting for future or lacking from past, just here, now, being. And in this moment of pure being without wanting, you're in the frequency of the timeline where everything is fulfilled. You're touching it right now. You're matching it through the simple act of being present without desire pulling you toward imagined future or lack, pushing you away from insufficient present. This moment of pure being is the doorway. This recognition that you're complete now is the key. And everything that follows is just learning to stabilize in this frequency, instead of constantly falling back into wanting addiction that society trained you to believe was normal, necessary, the only way to get anywhere in life. You're about to discover why everything you've been taught about manifestation has been backwards. Why wanting is the block. Why releasing desire is the access. Why the future that already has everything is closer than the one you're trying to create through wanting. And why the moment you stop wanting is the moment that future collapses into your present, not someday but now, through quantum mechanics that have been operating all along, but which wanting frequency prevented you from accessing. Before we dissolve the wanting addiction completely and show you how to match the already fulfilled timeline, you need to understand how wanting became so deeply embedded as your default operating system. Because wanting isn't natural. Babies don't want. They need, they express, they receive. Animals don't want. They sense what's required and move toward it without the psychological state of wanting. Wanting is learned. It's conditioned. It's deliberately installed as control mechanism that keeps you perpetually seeking, perpetually dissatisfied, perpetually in state of lack, that drives consumption, drives striving, drives the entire economy and social structure that depends on humans never feeling complete. The first layer of wanting conditioning is survival programming. Your ancestors needed to want food, want safety, want resources because survival required it. The organism that wanted more had better chance of surviving scarcity than the organism that was content with less. That survival mechanism got encoded into human consciousness. But here's the problem. You're not living in survival anymore. You have shelter, food, safety, yet the wanting mechanism is still running at maximum intensity, now applied to things that have nothing to do with survival. You want money beyond what you need. You want relationship beyond what serves you. You want achievement beyond what fulfills you. The survival program is executing in non-survival context, creating psychological suffering where biological necessity doesn't exist. The second layer is economic conditioning. Consumer capitalism requires perpetual wanting. If people felt complete, they'd stop buying. If people felt fulfilled, they'd stop striving. The entire economic system would collapse if humans shifted from wanting state to being state. So from birth, you're taught to want. Advertisements create wanting. Education systems create wanting for achievement. Social structures create wanting for status. Cultural narratives create wanting for more, better, different than what you have. You're marinating in wanting reinforcement every moment of every day, and most people never recognize that this isn't natural. It's engineered to keep you in perpetual lack state that drives behavior profitable to systems you're embedded in. The third layer is spiritual conditioning, which might shock you because spirituality is supposed to free you from worldly wanting. But most spiritual teachings actually reinforce wanting while pretending to transcend it. Set your intention for what you want to manifest. That's wanting. Visualize the life you desire. That's wanting. Raise your vibration to attract what you want. Still wanting. The language is spiritual, the techniques are sophisticated, but the underlying frequency is the same. You lack something, you want it, you're trying to get it. This is just wanting with spiritual vocabulary, and it keeps you in the same lack frequency that prevents manifestation from occurring. The fourth layer is the addiction to the wanting state itself. Wanting feels productive. It feels like you're doing something toward your goals. Wanting gives you sense of direction when you're uncertain what to do. Wanting provides motivation when you're not naturally inspired. You've become addicted to the feeling of wanting because it's familiar, because it's been reinforced constantly, because releasing it creates terror that without wanting, you'll become passive, aimless, unmotivated. But that fear is the addiction speaking. Being state isn't passive. It's powerfully present. It's not aimless. It's intuitively guided. It's not unmotivated. It's naturally expressed. The addiction to wanting is fear that without it you'll cease to function. But the opposite is true. Without wanting, you'll finally function from your actual nature rather than from conditioned lack program. The fifth layer is the belief that wanting is how manifestation works. If you want it badly enough, you'll get it. Your desires are clues to your purpose. Follow your passion. All of these teachings assume wanting is positive force driving you toward manifestation. But quantum mechanically, wanting is the frequency that keeps you in the timeline where you don't have what you want. The stronger the wanting, the more powerfully you're broadcasting lack, which causes the field to deliver more lack. This is why people who want things desperately rarely get them. The desperation is maximum lack frequency, and the field, being perfectly responsive, delivers more experiences that match that frequency. More experiences of desperately wanting, but not having. But here's what's crucial to understand. None of this is your fault. You didn't choose wanting addiction. It was installed before you had conscious awareness. You weren't taught that wanting is optional. You were taught that wanting is necessary, healthy, the source of all achievement and progress. Every institution in your life reinforced wanting as virtue, while being state was dismissed as laziness or spiritual bypassing or unrealistic idealism. You've been swimming in wanting culture your entire life without ever being shown that there's an alternative way to interface with reality, through being rather than wanting, through matching rather than chasing, through collapsing the timeline that already has everything rather than creating the timeline through decades of wanting-driven effort. Think about the rare moments when you weren't wanting. Maybe after achieving something significant, there was a brief period where you weren't wanting anything else. Maybe in deep meditation or peak experience, wanting dropped away completely. Maybe in crisis where survival demanded such total presence that wanting thoughts couldn't run. In those moments, without wanting frequency broadcasting lack, reality probably felt more alive, more magical, more responsive than normal. Things probably manifested more easily. Synchronicities probably increased. That wasn't coincidence. That was you accidentally accessing the being state where you match the already fulfilled timeline rather than creating perpetual lack through constant wanting. What we're doing is making that accident intentional, making that rare state your baseline, making that peak experience your default operating system. not by adding something or achieving something or becoming something you're not, but by releasing the wanting addiction that was never yours in the first place, was never natural, was never necessary for manifestation. By recognizing that the future timeline where everything is fulfilled already exists, and the only thing keeping you from collapsing into it is the wanting frequency that keeps you locked in the lacking timeline. Release wanting, match being, and the fulfilled timeline is yours. Not eventually, immediately, through quantum mechanics that have been waiting for you to stop wanting long enough to receive what's already present in the timeline you've now matched. There are specific signals that confirm you're beginning to release wanting addiction and access the timeline where everything is already fulfilled. These aren't achievements to create or states to force. They're natural phenomena that arise when consciousness shifts from wanting frequency to being frequency. And recognizing these signals, trusting what they show you, accelerates the complete dissolution of wanting as barrier between you and the already manifest future that's waiting only for you to match its frequency. The first signal is sudden manifestation after release. You want something intensely for weeks or months with no results. Then you genuinely let go, not as technique but as real release. And within days, sometimes hours, the thing manifests. This isn't coincidence. This is quantum mechanics responding to frequency shift. While you were wanting, you were broadcasting lack, which kept you in lack timeline. When you released wanting, you stopped broadcasting lack, which allowed consciousness to match having timeline where the desired thing already exists. The manifestation wasn't created through your release. It was revealed through your release, removing the wanting frequency that was blocking perception of the timeline where it already existed. The second signal is increased synchronicity without effort. When you're in wanting state, you're constantly trying to make things happen, strategizing, pushing, controlling. When you shift to being state, things start happening through synchronicity that you didn't plan or force. The right person appears, the needed resource manifests, the perfect opportunity opens. This happens because being frequency matches the timeline where everything flows naturally, where quantum field organizes reality around you, where synchronicity is normal function rather than rare occurrence. You're not creating the synchronicities. You're matching the timeline where synchronicity is how reality operates because you're not blocking it through wanting frequency interference. The third signal is contentment without reason. You're not experiencing everything you desire yet, but there's strange sense of being complete anyway. Not resignation or giving up, actual contentment. This is signal that consciousness is touching being state, matching the timeline where fulfillment is present regardless of circumstances. Because in that timeline, fulfillment isn't conditional on having specific things. Fulfillment is the ground state, and when you match that frequency even briefly, you feel it before physical circumstances have shifted to reflect it. The contentment isn't ignoring what you want. It's experiencing the frequency of the timeline where you already have it, even before physical manifestation completes. The fourth signal is desire without attachment. You still have preferences and directions, but they're lighter. There's no desperation, no neediness, no sense that your worth or happiness depends on getting what you want. This is crucial distinction. Being state doesn't eliminate desire. It transforms desire from want-based, coming from lack, to preference-based, coming from curiosity about what else is possible. When desire loses its attachment, its heaviness, its sense of, I must have this or I'm incomplete, that signal you're shifting from wanting timeline to being timeline, where you already have everything essential and are just playing with additional possibilities. The fifth signal is time collapsing around manifestations. Things you thought would take years appear in months. Things you expected to take months manifest in weeks. Duration shrinks dramatically, not because you're getting better at manifesting, but because you're releasing wanting frequency that creates time gaps between desire and manifestation. Being frequency matches timeline where desire and fulfillment are simultaneous or nearly so. The less you want, the faster things appear. Not as reward for not wanting, but as natural quantum mechanics of matching frequency that doesn't create delay through lack broadcasting. The sixth signal is reversed manifestation sequence. Normally you think, want it, work for it, eventually get it. But in being state, sequence reverses. The thing appears first, then you realize you wanted it, or you discover you wanted it only after having it. This seems impossible to wanting mind, but it's natural in being state because being frequency matches timeline where things manifest based on your deepest resonance rather than on your conscious wanting. Your true nature knows what serves you before your mind formulates it as want. When you're in being state rather than wanting state, manifestations arrive from that deeper knowing rather than from surface desires, which means they often appear before you consciously wanted them. The seventh signal is others noticing your shift. People comment that you seem different, lighter, more peaceful, more magnetic, even though you haven't changed anything external. This is them perceiving your frequency shift from wanting to being. Being state broadcasts completely different frequency than wanting state. It's more attractive because it's not needy, more powerful because it's not desperate, more magnetic because it's not chasing. Others perceive this even when they can't articulate what's different. They just know you've changed in fundamental way, and they're drawn to the being frequency that most humans rarely encounter because most are locked in perpetual wanting state. And the eighth signal is that you're here, reading these words, recognizing yourself in what's described. The quantum field doesn't deliver teachings randomly. If this transmission found you, if you're still reading, if something is resonating beyond intellectual agreement, you're already beginning the shift from wanting to being. The signals are activating. The wanting addiction is dissolving. The timeline where everything is already fulfilled is bleeding into your perception because you're matching its frequency through the simple act of recognizing that wanting might be the barrier rather than the bridge, the problem rather than the solution, the thing keeping you stuck rather than the thing moving you forward. Write in the comments which signals you're experiencing. Just list them. Sudden manifestation after release, or contentment without reason, or desire without attachment. That acknowledgement does something quantum. It locks in the frequency shift. It confirms the pattern. It tells consciousness and field that yes, you're releasing wanting. Yes, you're matching being. Yes, you're collapsing into the timeline where everything is already fulfilled rather than remaining in the timeline where you're perpetually wanting but never having. To understand how to shift from wanting frequency to being frequency and thereby match the timeline where everything is already fulfilled, you first need to recognize what already fulfilled actually means. Because this isn't metaphor or positive thinking. This is literal quantum mechanics. There are infinite timelines existing simultaneously right now. In some timelines, you have what you want. In other timelines, you don't. Which timeline you experience isn't determined by what you do. It's determined by what frequency you're broadcasting. And wanting frequency tunes you to lack timeline, while being frequency tunes you to fulfillment timeline. The shift isn't creating the fulfilled timeline. The shift is matching the one that already exists. Think of it like radio stations. All stations are broadcasting simultaneously. Which one you hear depends entirely on what frequency you're tuned to. You don't create the station by tuning to it. You access the station that's already broadcasting by matching its frequency. That's exactly how timelines work. The timeline where you're wealthy, fulfilled, successful, in perfect relationship. It's already broadcasting. It exists now, as real as this timeline. But you can't access it while you're tuned to wanting frequency, because wanting frequency is the frequency of the lacking timeline, not the fulfilled timeline. Quantum physics proves this through the many worlds interpretation. Every possibility exists in parallel reality, not as potential waiting to become real, but as actual reality existing now. The physicist Hugh Everett showed mathematically that quantum events create branching timelines where all possible outcomes exist simultaneously. Most people dismiss this as science fiction, but the mathematics is solid. And more importantly, your experience confirms it. Every time you make choice, you sense ghost possibilities of what might have been. Those aren't imaginary. Those are actual timelines you didn't collapse into, but which exist for versions of you that made different choices. The timeline where you already have what you want isn't waiting in future to be created through your effort and wanting. It exists now, parallel to this timeline, as real as this reality you're experiencing. And the only difference between this timeline and that timeline is the consciousness frequency that determines which one you experience. This timeline, wanting frequency, lack state, perpetual striving toward what you don't have. That timeline, being frequency, fulfillment state, living from recognition that you already have everything essential and are just exploring additional possibilities from that foundation. Here's what makes this revelation transformative. If the fulfilled timeline already exists, you don't need to create it through wanting and working and waiting. You just need to match its frequency. And the frequency of fulfilled timeline isn't wanting what I don't have yet. The frequency of fulfilled timeline is being who I am when I have everything. Not being who you'll become if you get it. Being who you already are in the timeline where you already have it. That version of you isn't wanting anything. That version is complete, fulfilled, being, rather than becoming. And the moment you match that frequency, even before physical circumstances change, you've collapsed into that timeline at quantum level. Physical reality catching up is just matter of the manifestation completing itself in physical form. But here's the part that makes most people struggle. Matching the fulfilled timeline requires genuinely releasing the wanting. Not as technique where you pretend to release while secretly still wanting. Not as spiritual bypass where you suppress desire and call it detachment, but actual release. Actual shift from wanting state to being state. Actual recognition that you're complete now regardless of whether you get the thing or not. This terrifies the wanting addiction because it sounds like giving up on your desires. But it's not giving up. It's giving into the quantum mechanics that make manifestation possible. You're not abandoning the desire. You're releasing the wanting frequency that prevents the desire from manifesting. Right now, there's a version of you in parallel timeline that has everything you want. That version exists as surely as you exist. That version is experiencing life you'd consider ideal. And the only difference between you and that version is frequency. That version isn't wanting anything because that version already has it. That version is in being state fulfillment frequency, living from completeness rather than from lack. And the path from where you are to where that version is isn't through wanting harder or longer or with better technique. The path is through matching that version's frequency by shifting from wanting to being, from lack to fulfillment, from I need this to be complete to I'm complete, and this would be a nice addition to explore. Can you feel how close you are to that timeline? How thin the membrane is between this reality and that reality? You're not separated by time or space or impossible gap. You're separated only by frequency, by the vibration you're broadcasting, by whether you're in wanting state or being state. And the moment you shift, the moment you genuinely release wanting and settle into being, that membrane dissolves. The timelines merge. You don't move from here to there. You recognize that here and there are the same place at different frequencies, and by matching the frequency, you're suddenly experiencing what was always available, but which wanting frequency prevented you from perceiving. 5 years ago, I was trapped in the most intense wanting state I'd ever experienced. Everything I desired seemed close, but remained just out of reach. I was doing all the manifestation techniques, visualizing, affirming, acting as if. But nothing was working, and the more I wanted, the more desperate I became, the further everything seemed to slip away. I didn't understand then that the wanting itself was the problem. I thought wanting was the fuel that would eventually deliver results if I just wanted hard enough, consistently enough, with enough belief. I was completely backwards. I was using maximum lack frequency while expecting fulfillment results. Then crisis forced an unintended shift. Health issue demanded such total presence, such complete attention to moment-by-moment survival, that all thoughts about wants and desires simply stopped. I wasn't trying to release them. They just couldn't run because consciousness was too occupied with immediate crisis to engage in wanting thoughts about future. And in that accidental shift from wanting to being, from future-focused to present-centered, from lack state to simple existence, something extraordinary happened. Everything I'd been desperately wanting started manifesting, not gradually, rapidly. One thing after another appearing through impossible synchronicities, through channels I hadn't considered, through pathways that shouldn't have existed. At first, I thought the crisis itself had somehow caused the manifestations, like universe rewarding me for suffering or teaching me through hardship. But as I analyzed the pattern, I realized the crisis didn't cause the manifestations. The crisis caused the release of wanting, and the release of wanting allowed me to match the frequency of the timeline where those things already existed. I wasn't creating anything new. I was collapsing into existing timeline that I'd been unable to access while locked in wanting frequency. The manifestations had been waiting all along in parallel reality. Wanting had kept me tuned to lack timeline. Crisis-induced presence had shifted me to being frequency that matched fulfilled timeline. After that recognition, I started testing deliberately. Could I access being state without crisis forcing it? Could I release wanting intentionally rather than accidentally? Could I match fulfilled timeline through conscious frequency shift rather than through unwanted circumstances creating the shift for me? The answer was yes. But the mechanics were counterintuitive to everything I'd been taught about manifestation. Every teaching said, want it, focus on it, desire it intensely, make it your obsession. But quantum mechanics said, release wanting, shift to being, match the frequency of already having it, tune to fulfilled timeline. The first deliberate test was radical. I chose the thing I wanted most intensely. The thing where wanting was strongest, most desperate, most consuming. And I practiced genuine release. Not pretending I didn't want it, not suppressing the desire, but shifting from, I want this to, I'm complete whether I get this or not. From, I need this to be fulfilled to, I'm fulfilled, and this would be interesting addition. From future-focused wanting to present-centered being. It took days of practice because the wanting addiction was so strong, so habitual, so convinced that releasing would mean losing any chance of getting what I wanted. But once the release was genuine, once I actually felt complete without the thing rather than just thinking I should feel complete, the manifestation happened with shocking speed. 3 days after authentic release, the thing I'd been desperately wanting for 2 years appeared through impossible synchronicity. Not because release was technique that manipulated the universe, but because release shifted my frequency from lack timeline to fulfilled timeline. The thing I wanted already existed in the fulfilled timeline. Wanting had kept me tuned to lack timeline, where it wasn't present. Releasing wanting tuned me to being frequency that matched fulfilled timeline, where it had been waiting all along. After that confirmation, I tested the pattern repeatedly. Small wants, big wants, material desires, relationship desires, circumstantial desires. Same mechanics every time. While wanting, no manifestation or very slow manifestation. After authentic release, rapid manifestation, often within days, sometimes within hours. The pattern was so consistent, so predictable, so perfectly aligned with quantum mechanics of consciousness, determining which timeline you experience through the frequency you're broadcasting. This wasn't belief or faith or positive thinking. This was physics. Quantum physics of parallel timelines accessed through frequency matching. What I learned through testing. The intensity of wanting is inversely proportional to speed of manifestation. The more you want something, the stronger the lack frequency, the more powerfully you're tuned to the timeline where you don't have it. The longer manifestation takes if it happens at all. The less you want something, or more accurately, the more you've released wanting and shifted to being. The weaker the lack frequency, the more you're tuned to fulfilled timeline, the faster manifestation appears. Not as cosmic reward system, but as pure quantum mechanics of frequency, determining which parallel reality you experience. This is what I wish someone had shown me decades earlier. That wanting is the block, not the bridge. That the fulfilled timeline already exists and doesn't need to be created through wanting effort. That release of wanting is access to being frequency that matches the timeline where everything is already present. That manifestation isn't about getting what you want. It's about matching the frequency of already having it by releasing the wanting frequency that keeps you perpetually lacking. Everything I'd been taught was backwards, and the moment I reversed it, stopped wanting, started being, matched fulfilled timeline instead of creating lack timeline, reality transformed not through my effort, but through my frequency shift, allowing me to experience the timeline that had been there all along. Now that you understand the quantum mechanics of parallel timelines and how wanting frequency locks you in lack timeline while being frequency matches fulfilled timeline, the question becomes practical. How do you actually release wanting? How do you shift from wanting state to being state when wanting is so deeply conditioned, so constantly reinforced, so automatic that you don't even notice you're doing it? How do you dissolve wanting addiction without suppressing desire or becoming passive or losing direction? The first key is distinguishing wanting from preferring. Wanting comes from lack. You don't have it. You need it to be complete. You're incomplete without it. Preferring comes from completeness. You're whole as you are, and you have preference for experiencing something additional. The energy is completely different. Wanting is heavy, desperate, needy. Preferring is light, curious, playful. When you catch yourself wanting, ask, am I wanting this from lack state or preferring this from complete state? If lack state, pause and shift to recognizing you're already complete. The thing you want might be nice addition, but you're whole without it. That shift from wanting to preferring is shift from lack frequency to being frequency. The second key is practicing fulfillment now. Not fulfillment when you get what you want. Fulfillment now, regardless of circumstances. This isn't pretending everything is perfect. This is recognizing that fulfillment isn't conditional on externals. Fulfillment is a state you can choose by recognizing you're already complete. You have consciousness, breath, life, awareness. That's the foundation. Everything else is addition. When you practice fulfillment now, actually feeling fulfilled before getting what you want, you're broadcasting being frequency that matches the fulfilled timeline where what you want exists. Not because being fulfilled attracts it, but because being fulfilled tunes you to the timeline where it's already present. The third key is releasing outcome attachment. You can have preferences and directions without being attached to whether they manifest exactly as you imagine. Attachment is where wanting lives. When you're attached to specific outcome, to specific timeline, to how and when, you're in wanting mode, lack frequency, tuned to timeline where it hasn't happened yet. When you release attachment while maintaining preference, you're in being mode, fulfillment frequency, open to the timeline where desire is fulfilled through whatever pathway serves highest good. This doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care without attachment, prefer without desperation, intend without neediness. The fourth key is using already is perspective. Instead of I want this someday, shift to this already exists in the fulfilled timeline and I'm matching that frequency now. Instead of I hope this comes to me eventually, recognize this is already mine in parallel reality and I'm collapsing into that reality through being frequency. Instead of when will this manifest, understand this already exists. And physical manifestation is just the lag time as this timeline catches up to the fulfilled timeline I've matched through releasing wanting. This isn't pretending or lying to yourself. This is recognizing quantum reality where parallel timelines all exist now, and which one you experience depends on frequency you're broadcasting. The fifth key is celebrating what is rather than lamenting what isn't. Every moment you focus on what you don't have yet, you're reinforcing lack frequency that keeps you in lack timeline. Every moment you appreciate what is present now, you're reinforcing being frequency that matches fulfilled timeline. This isn't settling or giving up on desires. This is matching the frequency of fulfillment, which is how you access the timeline where desires are fulfilled. Gratitude for now isn't obstacle to having more. It's the frequency match to the timeline where you have everything. The sixth key is noticing and interrupting wanting thoughts. Wanting operates through repetitive thoughts. When will this come? How long will this take? Why don't I have this yet? I need this to be happy. Every one of these thoughts is broadcasting lack frequency. Start catching them. The moment you notice wanting thought, pause. Don't judge it. Don't fight it. Just recognize it and choose different thought. I'm complete now. This would be nice addition. It already exists in fulfilled timeline, and I'm matching that frequency. Not as affirmation to convince yourself, but as recognition of quantum reality that's actually true. The seventh key is trusting the process of release. When you first start releasing wanting, it might feel like giving up or becoming passive or losing your edge.